The holographic map flared crimson, a ghost Talon helicopter down. 7 souls stranded. A blizzard closing in. And in the command center, the one person with a real solution was the rookie officer everyone refused to see. The Tactical Operations Center at Fort Trident was a cathedral of cold, blue light. Data streamed across a vast, curved wall, and at its center, a holographic map of the Cascade Mountains pulsed with a single, ominous red icon. Ghost Talon 7, carrying General Madsen, was down. Colonel Thorne paced before the hologram, his knuckles white as he gripped a polished mahogany swagger stick. His uniform was so sharply creased it looked like it could cut glass. Outside, the wind howled, throwing handfuls of snow against the reinforced windows. A blizzard, a monster of a storm, was descending from the north, threatening to swallow the entire mountain range. Status. Thorne barked, his voice slicing through the controlled chaos. No contact since the Mayday, sir, a communications tech replied. The crash activated a beacon, but it's weak. The storm is causing massive interference. Air rescue. Negative, Colonel. No pilot can fly in this. We're looking at zero visibility and wind shear that could rip a chopper apart. Thorne's jaw tightened. He jabbed the swagger stick toward the hologram. Ground teams. Standard winter assault protocol. Route Alpha through the valley. Senior officers murmured agreement, pointing at established routes on the glowing map. Their plans were safe, textbook, and slow. Terribly slow. From the edge of the command platform, Second Lieutenant Eva Rostova stepped forward. At 30, she was older than most new lieutenants, and her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, regulation bun that did nothing to soften the sharp intelligence in her steel-gray eyes. Her file said she was fresh from officer candidate school, a rookie on her first observation assignment. Sir, she said, her voice calm but clear. Route Alpha will be a death trap. The valley will flood with avalanche runoff within the hour. Thorne stopped pacing. He turned slowly, his eyes sweeping over her with theatrical disdain. And you are? Second Lieutenant Rostova, sir. Ah, the rookie, he said, a smirk touching his lips. Several officers nearby exchanged condescending glances. And what makes you an expert on alpine hydrology, Lieutenant? I've studied the geological surveys of this region, Colonel. There's an old, decommissioned mining ridge, Route Gamma, to the west. It's higher, more stable, and cuts the insertion time by at least 3 hours. She pointed to a faint, almost invisible line on the topographical display. Thorne let out a short, humorless laugh. A mining ridge? Lieutenant, we deal in military-grade solutions, not rookie fantasies based on dusty old maps. We follow protocol. Protocol exists to prevent mistakes. He turned his back on her, a clear dismissal. Prep Alpha and Bravo teams. Move out in 20. Eva stood her ground for a moment longer. Sir, with respect, protocol is about to get 7 men killed, including General Madsen. The entire room fell silent. Thorne spun back around, his face a mask of fury. He stepped so close to Eva that she could feel the heat of his anger. Your input was not requested, Lieutenant, he hissed, his voice dangerously low. You are here to watch, to learn, and to keep your inexperienced opinions to yourself. One more word out of line, and I'll have you scrubbing floors in the mess hall for a month. Is that understood? Eva's expression remained neutral, a carefully constructed mask. But behind her eyes, a storm of its own was gathering. She gave the only reply she could. Crystal, sir. She stepped back into the shadows, invisible once more. But as Thorne turned to bark more orders, Eva was already making a different calculation. The chain of command had failed. It was time for a new plan. Eva slipped out of the TACOPS unnoticed, the colonel's arrogant pronouncements echoing in her ears. She found Specialist Cole and Sergeant Diaz gearing up with the rest of Bravo team near the motor pool. Cole was young, barely out of his teens, his face a canvas of nervous energy. Diaz, a career NCO with a quiet confidence and lines etched around his eyes, was methodically checking his pack. Eva had worked with them on a training exercise last week. She knew they were solid. "I need you," she said simply, her voice low and urgent. They looked up, surprised to see her. "Lieutenant? We've got our orders." "Moving out with Bravo in 15, Diaz said. "Your orders will get you there 6 hours too late," Eva countered, pulling them aside behind a massive snow-clearing vehicle. "There's another way. A faster way. But it's off the books." She laid out the plan, her words precise and confident. She spoke of the mining ridge, the geological weak points of the main valley, the closing window of the storm. Cole's eyes widened with alarm. "Lieutenant, that's completely against orders," he stammered, glancing nervously toward the bustling depot. "Colonel Thorne would have our hides. This is career suicide." "It's a court-martial, is what it is," Diaz added, his expression grim. But he didn't dismiss her. He was watching her face, weighing the certainty in her eyes against the risk. "General Madsen doesn't have time for us to follow the rules," Eva stated, her gaze locking with Diaz's. "I'm going for that ridge, with or without you. But I'll have a better chance of getting them out if I have a medic and a seasoned rifleman with me." Diaz studied her for a long, tense moment. He looked from Eva's unwavering face to the swirling snow outside, then back again. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Cole, grab the advanced trauma kit. And pack extra climbing gear." "Sergeant?" Cole whispered, aghast. "You heard me, Specialist," Diaz said, his decision made. "Looks like we're going for a walk." 10 minutes later, they were ghosts, slipping through a little-used maintenance gate and into the teeth of the blizzard. The Pacific Northwest rainforest was a labyrinth of towering redwoods and moss-draped granite. The wind howled through the canopy, and the snow was already knee-deep, turning the world into a disorienting swirl of white and gray. They pushed forward for an hour, the silence broken only by their own ragged breaths and the crunch of their boots. Eva led them with an unnerving certainty, navigating by instinct and memory. They reached the crux of her plan, a deep chasm spanned by the skeletal remains of an old logging rope bridge. Icy water churned violently 100 feet below. Most of the wooden slats were gone, and the two main cables sagged ominously, coated in a thick layer of ice. "You've got to be kidding me," Cole breathed, staring at the drop. "No time for another way," Eva said, already shrugging off her pack. "We rebuild what we can. Diaz, we'll anchor a new line. Cole, you're our not expert." For 40 agonizing minutes, they worked in the freezing gale. Eva, fearless and efficient, directed the operation, her commands cutting through the wind. They secured a new rope, creating a makeshift handhold and a single, terrifyingly narrow foot line. Diaz went first, testing their work. He made it across, securing the line on the other side. Cole followed, his movements jerky with fear but precise. Eva was last. Halfway across, her radio, which she'd kept on a low-power, encrypted channel, crackled to life. It was Thorne's voice, cutting through the static, cold and furious. "All personnel, be advised. Second Lieutenant Rostova has left the base without authorization, along with Sergeant Diaz and Specialist Cole. They are to be considered rogue elements. If encountered, detain on site and return to base for disciplinary action. That is a direct order." The message ended. There was no turning back. They were truly on their own. After crossing the chasm, the terrain grew even more brutal. The ridge was a knife's edge of rock and ice. They moved in a state of heightened awareness, every step a calculated risk. Eva's focus was absolute. This wasn't about proving Thorne wrong anymore. It was about the 7 lives she'd gambled her career to save. Up ahead, Diaz shouted, pointing through a momentary break in the swirling snow. A pillar of black smoke stained the white landscape. It was the Ghost Talon. They scrambled down the final, treacherous slope, their boots sinking into deep drifts. The scene that greeted them was one of utter devastation. The helicopter lay on its side like a broken metal beast, its rotors shattered, its tail snapped in two. The air was thick with the sickeningly sweet smell of jet fuel, burning pine, and blood. Eva's mind went into overdrive, compartmentalizing the horror. Diaz, secure the perimeter, watch for hostiles. Cole, triage the survivors you can see. I'm checking the fuselage for the general. She didn't wait for a reply, sprinting toward the wreckage. Twisted metal groaned under the weight of the snow. A flicker of movement inside the mangled cabin caught her eye. "Hello?" she yelled over the wind. "Anyone in there?" A weak cough was her answer. "Here, trapped." Eva clambered onto the slippery hull, using a shattered window for a handhold. Inside, it was a nightmare of sparking wires and mangled seats. General Matson was pinned beneath a section of the collapsed bulkhead, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. He was conscious, his face pale but his eyes alert and assessing. "Sir, I'm Lieutenant Rostova. We're getting you out." The general's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "The rookie from the briefing? What the hell are you doing here?" he grunted, grimacing in pain. "Violating direct orders, sir," Eva replied without missing a beat. She was already examining the wreckage pinning him. It was a solid piece of the frame, too heavy for one person. "Diaz. I need you." The sergeant appeared at the opening, his face grim. "Sir." "Let's get him out," Eva commanded. Together, they put their shoulders against the metal. With a deafening screech, it shifted just enough for Eva to pull the general clear. He let out a sharp, pained gasp. "Compound fracture, right femur," Cole announced, having appeared beside them to assess the injury. "We need to splint it now." As Cole worked with battlefield efficiency, Eva's mind raced. "Sir, how many others?" "Pilot and co-pilot are gone," Madsen managed through gritted teeth. "My aide. Sergeant Miller," he was thrown clear. 2 others were in the back. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the wind, a low, hungry hiss. "Fuel line!" Diaz yelled. "It's leaking fast." A small flame licked up from beneath the engine block, growing with terrifying speed. "We have to move. Now!" Eva ordered. The rescue became a frantic, desperate scramble. Diaz and Eva carefully lifted the general, using a makeshift stretcher fashioned from a door panel. Cole guided 2 other walking wounded, one of them Sergeant Miller, toward a rocky overhang 50 yards away. They moved as fast as they could through the deep snow, the fire behind them roaring to life. They had just reached the shelter of the rocks when the Ghost Talon's fuel tanks erupted. A massive fireball tore through the blizzard, sending a shockwave across the mountainside and turning the sky a hellish orange. They were thrown to the ground, the heat washing over them even at a distance. They lay there for a moment, stunned, the silence after the explosion deafening. General Madsen, propped against the rock wall, looked at the burning pyre of his helicopter, then at the young rookie who had defied a colonel to pull him from it. He coughed, spitting blood. His first question wasn't about himself. "The rest of my men, Lieutenant. What's their status?" In that moment, Eva knew she had made the right choice. "The ravine path is a no-go for casualties," Diaz stated, his breath pluming in the frigid air as he surveyed their small group of survivors. "We'd never get the general down that ridge alive." They were in a desperate situation, stranded on a high-altitude ledge, with a critically injured general, 2 other wounded soldiers, and a blizzard that showed no signs of letting up. But Eva was already thinking ahead. She pulled a folded, laminated map from a waterproof pouch in her thigh pocket. It wasn't a standard military chart. "There's a high-altitude meadow about a half-mile north of here," she announced, pointing to a small, flat area on the map. "Local geological surveys call it Windy Mesa. It's small, but it should be flat enough for a chopper if we get a break in the weather." Madsen, his leg now splinted and stabilized by Cole, watched her with a sharp, analytical gaze. "You studied geological surveys for an observation mission, Lieutenant?" "I study everything, sir," Eva replied, already directing the others. "Diaz, we need to fashion stretchers from the wreckage debris. Cole, get the wounded ready to move. We have to be at that clearing before the next storm band hits." The half-mile trek was an ordeal. They fought through waist-deep snow and blinding wind, carrying the injured on makeshift sleds. Eva led the way, a relentless force of nature, pushing them onward when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. When they finally reached the clearing, it was just as the map had promised, a small, miraculously flat plateau surrounded by ancient, snow-laden pines. The wind was still fierce, but the snowfall had momentarily eased. "This is our window," Eva said, her voice tight with urgency. She immediately began setting up emergency flares in a triangular pattern. She climbed to the highest point of the mesa and switched on her radio. "Fort Trident Command, this is call sign Rogue Angel. Do you copy, over?" She used a non-standard call sign, hoping to bypass the command channel Thorne would be monitoring. Static answered. She tried again. "Trident Command, this is Rogue Angel. We have survivors from Ghost Talon 7, including General Madsen. Requesting immediate medevac at coordinates," she rattled off the numbers from her GPS. For a heart-stopping moment, there was only the hiss of the radio. Then, a new voice, calm and authoritative, cut through. "Rogue Angel, this is Trident Actual. Identify yourself." Eva's breath caught. Trident Actual was the call sign for the base commander himself, Major General Wallace. "This is 2nd Lieutenant Eva Rostova, sir. I am on site with General Madsen and 4 other survivors. 2 are critical." There was a pause on the other end. "Your position is confirmed, Lieutenant. But my tactical display shows you are in an unauthorized location, having disobeyed a direct order from Colonel Thorne." "Colonel Thorne's plan would have failed, sir," Eva said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Permission to speak freely, General." "Granted. We need a helicopter now, sir. We have a 20-minute weather window, maybe less. After that, you'll be recovering bodies." Another pause, longer this time. Eva could picture the scene in the TACOPS, Wallace weighing the word of a rogue rookie against his command structure. Finally, the voice returned, decisive. "A medevac bird is spinning up, Lieutenant. Their pilot is the best we have. ETA 15 minutes. Hold your position. Wallace out." Eva scrambled back down to the group. "They're coming," she announced. General Madsen managed a weak smile. "That was Wallace, wasn't it? Not Thorne?" "Yes, sir." "Interesting," was all he said, but his eyes held a new level of respect. He looked at Eva, then at the non-regulation map still clutched in her hand. "Your tactical decisiveness, you didn't learn that just by looking at a screen, did you, Lieutenant?" Before Eva could answer, a new sound reached them over the wind, the distinct whump-whump-whump of rotor blades. Hope had arrived. The medevac helicopter descended through the swirling snow with breathtaking skill, its landing skids touching down in the center of the flare-lit mesa as gently as a falling leaf. The doors slid open and a team of paramedics rushed out, their movements efficient and urgent. As they loaded General Madsen onto a proper stretcher, he grabbed Eva's arm. "You're on this bird, Lieutenant. That's an order." Minutes later, they were airborne, punching through the storm clouds into the calm, dark sky above. Through the window, Eva watched Fort Trident grow larger, a constellation of lights against the snow-covered earth. Her mind raced. She had succeeded in her mission, but she knew a different kind of storm was waiting for her on the ground. The landing pad was a scene of organized chaos. Medical teams stood ready, but at the forefront, standing rigid and furious under the floodlights, was Colonel Thorne. The moment the helicopter door opened, he pushed past the medics. "Rostova," he bellowed over the whine of the engines. Front and center. Eva exited, her uniform muddy and torn, her face scratched, but her posture was ramrod straight. She rendered a perfect salute. "Colonel. You disobeyed a direct order." Thorne shouted, stepping so close their faces were inches apart. The smell of his angry righteousness was a palpable thing. "You stole equipment, endangered 2 soldiers, and interfered with a sanctioned rescue operation. I will see you court-martialed and stripped of that uniform before sunrise." Behind him, a second helicopter landed, depositing a weary Diaz and Cole, who were immediately flanked by military police. They stood at attention, their faces grim but resolute. A crowd of onlookers had gathered, officers, enlisted personnel, all watching the public dressing down with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. A young officer, the same one who had smirked at Eva in the TACOPS, stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, perhaps this could be handled in private." "Private?" Thorne spun on him. "This failure of discipline needs to be a public spectacle. Every soldier on this base needs to see the consequences of breaking the chain of command." "Colonel Thorne." A sharp voice cut through the tirade. It was General Madsen, being carefully unloaded from the helicopter on a stretcher. He waved the medics to a halt. Thorne immediately straightened. "General, sir. Please, let the medics attend to you. I am handling this gross insubordination." "Are you?" Madsen's voice was cold as ice. "Because from where I'm lying, Colonel, it looks like you're publicly berating the officer who just saved my life and the lives of 4 of my men." Thorne faltered, his face flushing a deep red. "Sir, protocol was violated. Your protocol would have left us to freeze to death on that mountain." Madsen shot back. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Major General Wallace stepped out of the shadows, his presence commanding immediate silence. "The general is correct, Colonel," Wallace said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Their actions, while unorthodox, produced results when the official plan had not." "Sir, with all due respect." Thorne sputtered, his composure cracking. "We cannot have rookies deciding which orders to follow. It's anarchy. And we cannot have commanders who allow protocol to supersede saving lives," Wallace countered. He looked from Thorne's apoplectic face to Eva's stoic calm. The contrast was stark. He took a deep breath, his decision made. "Colonel Thorne, you will be in my office tomorrow at 0600. We are going to have a very long discussion about command philosophy and emergency response. Lieutenant Rostova, you and your team will report to my office at 0700. He turned to the MPs guarding Diaz and Cole. "Release them." As the medics wheeled General Madsen toward the base hospital, he caught Eva's eye. A silent message passed between them, "It's not over." Thorne glared at Eva, his voice a low growl. "This changes nothing, rookie. Nothing." He stormed off. For a moment, Eva, Diaz, and Cole stood alone together on the tarmac, the 3 of them a silent island in the swirling snow. "Worth it, Lieutenant?" Diaz asked quietly. A small, weary smile finally touched Eva's lips. "Ask me tomorrow." The next morning, Major General Wallace's office felt like the calm at the center of a hurricane. Eva stood at attention, flanked by Diaz and Cole, all 3 in immaculate dress uniforms. Colonel Thorne was already present, pacing near the window like a caged tiger. But they were not alone. General Madsen was there, sitting in a wheelchair with his leg in a cast. And on a large video conference screen, the stern faces of 2 3-star generals from the Joint Chiefs of Staff watched silently from the Pentagon. At ease, Wallace commanded, his voice grave. He fixed his gaze on Thorne. "Colonel, you have formally recommended 2nd Lieutenant Rostova for court-martial on charges of insubordination and dereliction of duty. Is that correct?" "Yes, General," Thorne replied, his voice rigid with self-assurance. "Military discipline is absolute. Her actions, however well-intentioned, were a flagrant violation. Noted, Wallace said. He turned to Eva. Lieutenant, do you have anything to say in your defense? No excuses, sir, Eva said, her voice steady. I assessed the tactical situation, made a command decision, and I accept full responsibility for the consequences. Thorne scoffed. She admits it freely. Quiet, Colonel, General Madsen interjected. He wheeled himself forward slightly. Let me ask you, Lieutenant. If you were faced with the exact same circumstances again, what would you do? I would make the exact same call, sir. Every single time. A faint smile touched Madsen's lips. He addressed the room. Gentlemen, what happened yesterday was not a failure of discipline. It was a failure of our system. A system that has become so rigid, so obsessed with protocol, that it sometimes forgets its primary purpose, to win battles and save lives. He gestured toward Eva. This officer identified a fatal flaw in a plan, proposed a viable alternative that was dismissed out of hand due to her perceived rank, and then took the initiative when it was clear that official channels would lead to catastrophic failure. Sir, you are letting your personal gratitude cloud your judgment. Thorne protested. Why was this rookie even assigned to your detail? A knowing look passed between Madsen and Wallace. Because, Colonel, Wallace said, his voice dropping and commanding the full attention of the room, she's not a rookie. He pressed a button on his desk. Eva's file appeared on the screen, her photo displayed next to the rank of second lieutenant. Then, with another click, the file changed. The rank insignia shifted. The bio updated. Captain Eva Rostova, Wallace announced, the words dropping like stones into the silent room. Graduated top of her class from West Point. Advanced training in force reconnaissance and asymmetrical warfare. For the past 18 months, Captain Rostova has been operating under deep cover as part of a Joint Chiefs Special Assignment, Project Ares. Her mission is to embed in units across all branches to conduct real-world assessments of combat readiness and command flexibility. The color drained from Thorne's face. He looked from the screen to Eva, who remained at perfect, impassive attention. That's impossible. Your rigid adherence to an outdated plan, your dismissal of critical intelligence because of its source, and your punitive reaction to a successful outcome demonstrated a dangerous lack of adaptability, Colonel, Madsen said, his voice laced with disappointment. He slid a data slate across the desk to Wallace. This is from the Ghost Talon's black box. It recorded Captain Rostova's calm, decisive commands during the rescue. Wallace glanced at the slate. Colonel Thorne, effective immediately, you are reassigned. You will be spending the next year at the Pentagon reviewing historical combat doctrine. Perhaps you'll learn that rules are a guide, not a cage. He looked at Thorne. Dismissed. Thorne, his career in ruins, turned and walked out of the room like a man in a trance. Wallace then addressed Diaz and Cole. Your actions demonstrated exemplary judgment in supporting a superior officer, even when you didn't know she was one. Commendations will be placed in your permanent files. Finally, all eyes turned to Eva. Captain Rostova, General Madsen said with profound respect. Your cover is blown here, but your assessment is complete. You saved us. You proved your point. Just doing my job, sir, she replied. Later, walking across the base in her proper captain's uniform, the atmosphere had changed. The whispers that followed her were no longer of disdain, but of awe. Soldiers who had ignored the rookie now snapped to attention, saluting with newfound respect. She saw Diaz and Cole up ahead. They stopped, waiting for her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the shared experience of the storm and the fire a bond between them. A captain? Diaz said, shaking his head with a slow grin. The whole time? Eva shrugged, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. Sometimes you have to break a few rules to make sure the right ones are being followed. As she walked on, she knew her mission at Fort Trident was over, but the real work was just beginning. What do you think defines a true leader, following orders or getting results? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and always remember to comment with respect. If this story of courage and conviction moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more.